Well, hello there. Cynthia here in My Quilt Lab. Welcome. Hey, I'm doing a new experiment this year, 2023. That means it's a new block of the month, and I hope you stick around with me this year. It is Solare. It's another Banyan Batiks by Northcott. The amazing designers are Bound to Be Quilting. And I got to give a big thank you to Bound to Be Quilting, Banyan Batiks, and of course, Adirondack Quilts, who is sponsoring this year's block of the month again. And I have lots of spaces still available if you want to head over to their website and find all the information. Hey, join me on this ride. You'll find all that stuff, all those links, all those people and places in the description below. So go down there, take a look. Give me the thumbs up, hit subscribe so you don't miss any of the fun months, and let's get going and talk about month number 1. It is called The Hidden Star, and you can see all the lovely fabrics here. Fabrics numbers 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, and there's one of them. We're going to be making 2 of these blocks, and I've already done the one. So let me just do a quick tutorial with all the pieces and I'll show you how I got to here from here. Let's get stitching. All right, so let's just look at this block real quick and talk about the pieces of all the cutting stuff. You can see here that it's basically just 2 blocks. We have half square triangles and then we have a square and a square. All of these 5 are square and a squares. So, happy note number 1 is they give us plenty of fabric. I didn't have any problem cutting out anything, so don't worry about that. You'll see the 2 big ones here. This is for the half square triangles, and they are using the 2 squares to make 2 half square triangles. And then down here, the fabric 6 and 7, these are going to be cut diagonal one ways because they're going to be these little corner pieces in here, and then that pretty kind of chilly looking fabric and the purple, those are the squares in the middle. So these are going to say added right there. Okay, let's just talk a little quick thing about what you'll see in the instructions for the cutting. Most of these cuttings are on eighths, like 3 7/8, 2 3/8, and so on and so forth. So let's just review those eighths. So I've blown up a ruler, just the 1 inch of a ruler. Let's pretend, and you'll see on your ruler there's the 1, there's the 2. In the center, of course, that's the half, but every one of these little hashes, those are eighths. So 1/8, 2/8, otherwise known as 1/4, 3/8, 4/8, otherwise known as 1/2. 5/8, 6/8, or 3/4, 7/8, and then of course 8/8, which is the next step up, the next, in this case, number 2. So when you're going to cut everything, you want to make sure that you're paying attention and you're counting. Okay, I need to be on 3/8, so I need to be on 5/8, I need to be on 7/8, because it's going to be really important to be really accurate when you're going to cut this fabric, so that you get the right sizes, so that you get the right size block at the end. That said, I did one alteration with this, with the half square triangles, and it has to do with those 2 big pieces. Quilt Math says if I want a finished, let's say 4-inch block, a finished 4-inch block, that I'm going to add 7/8 to that square and cut 2 of those to do that no waste method that we're going to be using here. I don't like 7/8. I'm not a big fan, so I always bump it up to the nearest, which in this case would be the 5. Or in the pattern, for instance, they're doing a 3. So 3 7/8. So I bumped it up to a 4. But that means because I made my squares a smidgen bigger, I'm going to have to cut them down a little bit when I go to start piecing the block together. I just want to show you this method. I just want to shout out to this. It is absolutely fine to do the 3 7/8 like they say in the pattern. I just want to give you a little option so that if you feel like doing something just a smidgen easier, you can. All right, so the first thing you want to do is, of course, cut all your pieces. Please be very accurate in your cutting. Give everything a nice press before you cut. And let's get started and talk about actually putting these pieces into the block. Let's go. All right, so grab your big squares, and you're going to need one of each for each two. And in the directions, it's going to tell you to draw a line down right down that center. There's that line right there. I used pretty pink this time. But if you've watched any of my previous videos, you know that when I'm doing half square triangles, I love using this little guy. And it lets me draw 3 lines. That's center line and then a line on each side that's 1/4 of an inch away, because that's what we're going to stitch on. So I'm going to stitch on these solid lines after I pair them up, and then we're going to come back and cut. So the power of movies. There we go. So you can see that I've stitched on either side of that center line, and now I can cut down that center line. That's why I love this little ruler, and I'll put a link for it down in the description below. So I'm going to take my handy dandy little ruler here, and we're going to cut down the middle. All right, so now you want to take this to your iron and press it open. They don't give any descriptions as far as pressing is concerned. It leaves it up to you. So if you want to press towards the dark side, you can. If you want to open the seam up, that is your choice as well. No quilt police here. Do what you feel is best. When I bring over the finished block, you can see that I did indeed press towards that dark side. But feel free to do what works for you. This is an intermediate block of the month, and I want you to feel free to expand your horizons and do something that feels comfortable for you. Now, like I mentioned earlier, I did make these blocks, instead of the 3 7/8, the 4-inch. So that means I've got to get my ruler back here and trim it down just a little bit, because the finished block needs to be 3, so the unfinished needs to be 3 1/2. And you'll see that because I did the 4, you see how just a little bit bigger. So I've lined the diagonal right on the diagonal of the seam, and I can just swipe away the extras, the little extra parts. Flip, flip, flip. Now I can line up that center seam again on that diagonal, and there we go. Have my 3 1/2 inch along the 2 edges that I just cleaned up. And this is nice because it's going to take off all those little dog ears too. Now, I did not make any of the other squares bigger. The other squares I finished at the sizes it says, but you'll see me getting rid of the dog ears at those too. All right, so do this. You'll have 4 of these, one of each corner. Give it a nice press. And now let's move on to those square and squares. Let's go. Okay, there's the 4 half square triangles. Let's put these aside and grab the little squares. Okay. So if you look back at that block, you'll remember that the purples and that one lowly square, that's the center pieces. So we'll set those aside, and we're going to cut all of these other pieces in half diagonally to be the corners around the square. So let's do that real quick. All right, there we go. So for that centerpiece, you're going to need 4 of the orange triangles. 1, 2, 3, 4. And for the purples, you're going to need 2 of the orange and 2 of those, well, kind of beige colored. 1, 2, 1, 2. So let's set these aside and talk about this. You'll see in the instructions that it says to do the opposite side first. So it's going to have you do this seam, then this seam, press them open, and then do the right and the left. Let me give you a little tip that I like to do so that I make sure my triangles are centered properly on my squares. And it's really simple. I just fold the square in half and I give it a little finger press at the edges. I don't need to do the full square, I just need to do the edge so that I can see a little crease. Open it back up. And since that I know is going to be hard to see on camera, I'm just going to throw a couple pins in so it's obvious. So there's my crease right there. And my other crease is right there. So that's the center. I'm going to do the same thing with the triangle. I'm going to fold that in half and I'm going to crease right at on the long side because that's the side that's going to match up. And there's the crease right there. And now all I have to do is line that crease up with the crease on the square. And because I've already pinned it, I can just throw a pin in right away. Same thing with the other side. Fold it in half, give it a little press, match it up to the middle on the square. This way I know that I'll have the exact same overhang. You see how it hangs over a little bit on the squares? And that way I know it's going to be centered correctly. So I'm going to go and take this to the machine real quick and then we'll talk about the other side so you can see everything on camera. All right, and there's the 2 sides. So now I just need to do that 2 more times to do the other sides. Same exact way. Fold it in half and give it a little crease. And there we go. Now I'm ready to take this side to the sewing machine as well. And when I sew, this is just a personal thing. I like to sew with that square on top. It's just me. It's just because I like that nice long edge and I can see everything. And then we're going to do the same thing with these. Only each time you do the opposite sides, you'll see that they all kind of look like this. Even though they're turned in different directions, they're all the same. One half is the yellowy orange and the other half is that beige. So it's the exact same block as this middle one. It's just every time you're doing the pairs, you do it in opposites with the 2 different colors. Okay? All right, so you're going to do one of that's kind of chili cinnamon color for the center, and you'll have 4 of these finished. You can see that I pressed out away from that block, but again, feel free to open it up if you want to. And I'll see you in just a moment with 5 square and a squares. Let's get stitching. All right, there's all the squares. Like I told you, I like to cut off the little dog ears, so I thought I'd do just this last one on camera. And I'm just lining it up with the different lines, half, quarter, and quarter, so that means 3 1/2. So, and there we go. I don't know, there's just something about making it look a little cleaner, right? So you have 4 of the purple center ones and 1 of the chili center. Let's grab those half square triangles and let's put them in order. All of the half square triangles go in the 4 corners, and the purple is pointing towards the center. There we go. Of course, that chili one, that the oddball, is there in the middle. And then you just want to make sure you're rotating the purple center ones so that the orange is in towards the center, because that's where the hidden star is. It's there in the center. Just be careful that you don't accidentally, turn one the other way. All right, so you can probably guess what we're doing next. We are putting these in rows. That's right. First row, second row, third row. The first and the second and third are pretty similar. The authors do call out to make sure that everything's being rotated the right way. So that's why I like recommending laying everything out and then taking each piece individually to the sewing machine so that you can make sure everything's getting put in where it needs to be put in. All right. So again, there's no instructions as far as pressing. So let me just bring back my finished one. And you can see on that top row and the bottom row, I've pressed towards the half square triangles. And that middle row, I pressed towards that center one. And that's because I wanted to make sure that they would butt up at those 4 corners. Now that said, you can absolutely open up all the seams, and that's going to be an easy way to match up those corners when we go to put the rows together as well. All right, so I'm going to take a few pictures as I go so you can see my process, and then we'll come back with 3 finished rows, and then we'll talk about putting them together. Okay? To the sewing machine. Alright, so there's the 3 rows. Now, before I move on, I forgot to tell you a little tip that I like to do when I'm worried about, these nice points. So, I'll show you over here. I like to sew with that square on top. That way, when I'm sewing along, I can make sure that my needle hits just beyond where that point is. I like to be able to see that point. So I did that. This block was always on top, no matter where I was in here. Now, I know your question is, well, what about that middle row? You have 3 of the squares. Well, it gets a little bit more difficult here. What I like to do is I like to go put a pin right through the top of that first one, and then I grab the second one and aim for it on the other side. And then I go and put pins on either side because I know that that's holding it in place, and 2 other pins there. So that way so it'll look like 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that way when I'm stitching along, I can slowly take these pins out, and hopefully when I go to open things up, my points are nice and crisp. And you can see that's pretty good right there. And this one's just off ever so slightly, but I'm okay with that. Better done than absolutely perfect. And that's just a couple of things I like to do. All right, so now we need to put the rows together. And let me just talk you through what I'm going to do. I'm going to butt these 2 sides up. You can see, let me flip these over so you can see that out, in, out. That way when I go to pin them together, I can butt that seam up next to each other. So when I go to take my pin, I'm going to aim right through the center of that first stitch. And if I'm aiming straight on, it's going to come out pretty close to that same size. And I can keep aiming until I get it perfect. And there, now it's perfect. So you see, through one stitch, out the other stitch. Now I know for certain that those points, that line is perfect. And then I'm going to do the same thing that we talked about with the flip side. Let me just throw a pin in here. So with this one, I'm going to sew with this strip on top, and that's because I have 3 points to aim for, whereas this one just has the 1. So let me show you what I was doing originally. Taking this pin, I'm going through the top of that point, so you can see when I turn it around, it's through the top of that point, and I'm aiming through the top of the point on the piece below. Get it nice and straight, I aim for it, and then I'm going to throw a pin on either side of it so that it stays put. Grab one more. And there we go. And now I'm ready to take this to the sewing machine, again with this strip on top, so that when I sew along, I can aim for those 3 points and hopefully get nice crisp corners when I go to press it out. And you can see from my previous block that I pressed up towards the half square triangles or down towards, and that's because there's just a little less bulkiness up here than if I had pressed towards the middle. Again, it is a lot of bulkiness. If you want to open these seams up so that it takes away some of the bulkiness, that is absolutely up to you. I'm going to take this to the sewing machine, and then I'm going to come back and I'll do the other one in pictures, and I'll see you with a finished block number 1. Let's get stitching. There we go. We have finished block number 1. Give it a nice press, maybe use a little starch or best press. Make this block 2 times, because you'll see in the picture, there they are, right there and there. All right, well, that was block number 1. That means we have 11 more months to go to put this all lovely together. So I hope I'll see you next month for block number 2. As always, have fun, keep quilting, and I'll see you later in my quilt lab. Bye-bye.